Looking for Charlene by any
No,
chance?
Charlene will take the notes from the recording.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:01. We need to review and accept our agenda for this special board meeting. So do we need to do that for each board, or can we do it all as one?
I think it's really just an informational meeting, so I think you're okay. One.
So we don't really need to do that. Excellent. Okay. So the reason why we're here tonight is that we are going to hear from Superintendent Collins regarding her review of the reopening of schools plan, and there will be a Q&A session with board members. I do want to put out there that for any parents, citizens, and staff who might be with us and who have questions, we would like you to put them in the comment or the group chat that should be part of your Zoom. If you look at the other, there's a chat screen. So please feel free to put your questions in there. We will be using those questions to build the district's reopening schools FAQ document. Also note that due to potential time restraints, responses may not be provided for all questions at the time of this meeting, but those questions in the chat will be used to develop the FAQ document and will be distributed to the community and posted online as soon as we have it available for everyone. So without further ado, Jean.
Thank you. So thanks, everyone. I know that everyone's kind of eager to understand what the plan is beyond what I put out to parents on Thursday and how we got there. I would like to start with an introduction of Melanie Parker. Melanie is the school nurse at Lothrop Elementary, and she is our school nurse liaison in the district. So she is basically our major COVID coordinator who has participated on the task force and helped us with the health guidance of all of this. And since there is a lot of anxiety about kids returning to school and is it safe, I thought a good place to start would be with the mitigation factors that are in place and the science behind them that Melanie can kind of walk you through. So Melanie, thank you for joining us on your vacation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Jeannie, I was looking for the list, and as you said, I'm on vacation, so yeah. Remind me if I forget something.
Okay.
So I think the big thing that people have on their minds are masks, and our plan and all plans within the state should include that everyone is wearing cloth face coverings when they are at school, before they board buses, basically before they have contact with anyone. I mean, the governor's ruling that everyone should be wearing cloth face coverings after August 1st hopefully will help with that, and people will be more practiced at it. And I know in a previous board meeting, we had a lot of conversation about children and masks, and it's pretty much been decided school-age children can wear cloth masks, and anyone who can't would need to be on sort of a special plan. We will be doing health screenings before children board buses, before children get out of their cars if they are driven to school, and before they enter buildings if they are walking to school. That will include questions and a temperature check. We know that the infrared thermometers are not the most accurate, but they are what we have been directed to use. And the feeling is that if someone actually has a fever, it will show up on an infrared thermometer. In schools, there will be increased cleaning 3 times a day. Jeannie, nod if that's correct, 3 times a day. Even while students are there, children will have individual supplies absolutely as much as possible. So we will decrease sharing of supplies. For physical distancing, everyone is supposed to stay 6 feet apart. Even when they go out to recess, they will have their masks on. Unless they are outside and 6 feet apart, they can take them off. And obviously they will need to take them off for eating. But they should be properly spaced while eating as well. Jeannie, what was next on our list?
Hand washing routines.
Oh, hand washing routines. So with all the stress about hand washing, there are very specific times. There's a list of specific times that everyone should be washing their hands. We'll have them posted in all rooms. Staff will be trained before school starts about when those times are. We started reviewing hand washing procedures before school was dismissed in the spring. So that's not new learning except for our youngest learners, but even the preschools were doing it then. And yes, they'll be prompting and reminding, but we also have adequate hand sanitizer so that in the absence of running water and soap, we have plenty of hand sanitizer available.
And Melanie, could you talk about what happens if a child or a staff person really does become ill?
If we think someone is ill, they will be sent to the nurse to be assessed. Nurses will have the right personal protective equipment for themselves so they can conduct the screening. Each school will have an isolation room. So if the nurse suspects that it may be COVID-19, that child will be placed in the isolation room with supervision, and we hope to contact their parents absolutely as soon as possible and get them picked up. If we suspect COVID-19, we're required to notify the Vermont Department of Health, and what happens from that point on is under direct direction from the Vermont Department of Health. So a lot of people have questions about that, but none of it is our decision to make. If we suspect it's COVID-19, it goes directly into their hands and we do what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Did I cover that, Jeannie?
Yes, and along with that, we are required to keep students in, they call them pods, but in cohorts, and keep strict attendance lists and seating charts so that if somebody in a class were to become ill, the Department of Health can easily do contact tracing and squash any type of breakout basically before it spread in the community. So that's another requirement we have, which is why the schools will be closed to visitors or anybody who is unnecessary to the learning environment for actually providing instruction. So no visitors, no parents, maybe not even me. Are there health concern questions for Melanie?
Excuse me, sorry, what happens if somebody, what will it look like if somebody is COVID positive in school? What, does it close?
Probably not. They're hoping that it will not close. Again, it would be up to the health department to make that decision. You know, the first step would obviously be testing, and then they're going to ask us for our contact logs. So any grouping that a child is in will have its own contact log. And if a child, say the child is in first grade in a classroom, and then they go to after school program, we would have to supply both of those logs to the health department.
And it is,
they decide who is actually a close contact. There's very specific guidelines for what is considered a close contact. And then the school would be responsible for the disinfection of whatever spaces that child had been in. But that's supposed to be part of our daily routine anyway. But I don't think a school would close.
it's possible we would have to close a classroom if the Department of Health recommended it, as opposed to the whole school at the same time.
Jean, this is Bonnie.
I'm sorry, Bonnie, Mike actually raised his hand, so I'm going to reinforce that excellent behavior and call on him because I'm a special educator. Mike.
Thank you. Well, that was kind of my answer, might have been question or answered, but I was wondering, so would they have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks if someone's suspected or has it?
Yes, it's pretty likely that they would be self-quarantining. Yes. Bonnie, thank you for raising your hand.
See, you reinforced two behaviors. I just figured out how to raise my hand. Two things, just because I was in a meeting today on that same very topic. We did get the question straight, at least what the answer is at the moment. If someone leaves with suspected symptoms, the classroom does not have to quarantine immediately, but if the person is found to have COVID, then everyone in the classroom will be expected to quarantine for 14 days. And then the other thing, Melanie, just FYI, they suggested for those schools who can have a quarantine room, they said that if someone has suspected symptoms, that they should be taken to the quarantine room and let the nurse decide from there if they should go into the regular nurse's office. The thought being you kind of contaminate your nurse's office if someone really is COVID positive. So they just suggested flipping it around.
Yeah, we're really hoping, the nurses met this morning, and we are really hoping that we won't have any surprise symptomatic students arriving in our offices, that we'll have a sound procedure in place where whoever is suspecting it calls first, we meet them, we screen them, and then take steps from there.
Thank you.
So the whole point of the health guidance is to reduce the possibility of transition and then to mitigate any transmission should COVID into the school. So with the health screenings, the temperature checks, the asking of the questions, the wearing of the mask, and the physical distancing and the hand washing, all of those measures are intended to, well, health screening is intended to prevent it from entering, and the other measures are intended to prevent it from spreading. So we have all of those systems in place along with the extra cleaning, as Melanie mentioned. Any final questions for Melanie? Thank you, Melanie. You are welcome to stay or continue vacation. Your choice.
I'll stay a little while longer because sometimes other parts will crop up that include health, but if I disappear, I disappear.
Well, thank you. You put in a lot of time this summer for us, and I appreciate that. So as I announced on Thursday, if I can move to the plan, we are going to open in a slow start kind of model. We have been meeting, we have been talking about the start of school since way back in May. However, it was not until the middle of June that we got the state guidance that allowed us to deeply dive into the planning. So we had all kinds of theories, but until we knew exactly what restrictions were in place and what guidance the state was going to give us, we couldn't dive in heavily. So following that, we pulled together our COVID task force, which consists of teachers, administrators, facilities, technology, curriculum, school nurse. And we did have some parent reps on there who are also in other roles in the district. And first we took care of the logistics pieces, what Melanie just talked about. Do we have the masks? Do we need to order them? Do we have the cleaning supplies? Do we need to get more custodians? Do we need to get bus monitors for the health screening? Do we need to get thermometers? All of those things were taken care of first. And then I broke it into an elementary task force for K to 5, pre-K to 5 technically, and a middle school, high school for 7 to 12. And again, the same types of roles were on the committees, but not necessarily the same people in all of them, because I had elementary teachers on one and middle school, high school teachers on the other. So we started out, our assumption from the very beginning was, how do we get our kids in school safely? Because our primary purpose is to educate in purpose. That is our goal. That is what we'd like to do. We also were getting a great deal of information about COVID. And if you recall, if your head was spinning over all the information coming out the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks like me, then, I'm sure you understand that it's like every single day, it's like you're headed in this direction and suddenly you have to go that direction, then you have to go that direction. That's what it's been like. But we had two primary goals in mind: to make sure that we have a safe learning environment and to provide as high quality an education as we can for our kids. We also were aware that even if we successfully bring all of our students back, we are very likely going to be out In remote learning, again, once, twice, 3 times, it's hard to say, but the likelihood of another round or wave of COVID closing the schools is a very high likelihood. So we also knew that we needed to better perfect or improve our remote learning possibilities. So all these 3 things were happening at once, working on the safe environment, working at getting kids into school, and working on solid remote learning possibilities. For the remote learning possibilities, we did close school 4 days early in June, which gave our faculty 7 days to dig into some professional development on how to be an online teacher 3 months after I asked them to do it. That was the reality of the world that we were living in. So people both took and taught classes on how to use the tools. How do I teach math online? How do I, sharing ideas, etc. Then we also signed up all of our teachers for the Vermont virtual learning community online teaching program on how to be an online teacher. We also developed an RNESU module of learning, and then we provided other resources for staff to do on their own this summer. That still is not like a multi-year preparation for being an online teacher, which is what most institutions do when you're going to go this route. But it was significantly better than what we had in March. We also, our curriculum director also started some curriculum committees to look at our curriculum and really hone in on what are the essential learnings at each grade level that have to be done throughout the year, so that when teachers return, we're all much more focused. Again, at the end of the year, there's been a great deal of freedom on when you teach different things. And so different teachers in the same grade level were teaching different things, and that caused a little bit of chaos and confusion for some. And so now we'd like to go through 6-week units in the minds of the teacher of this. These are the essential learnings that we should be covering these 6 weeks, be it in person, be it remote, but we should all be in the same place. So we've been trying to design those, which is a little bit more difficult at the high school because you have to do it by content level, not grade level, but they also have been they are still working on it. And then we also have been working on what are our expectations for online teaching. So again, in the spring, it was all over the map. In the fall, we want the online teaching to be a little bit more synchronous. So at the elementary level, that means the teacher is teaching during the school day, and on the Google Classroom, there's a schedule of when the kids sign on for classroom meeting, for their own literacy group, for their math group. It's not 7 hours of sitting in front of a computer, but it's instruction that's happening during the school day. At the high school, we actually would like to run the regular schedule. There are 4 blocks a day in a shortened day. And the kids know that they show up for block 1 at 8:30 and block 2 at 9:15 and block 3 like that. And so that changes the way a teacher teaches, because when you have your kids in front of you, you can kind of react to how students seem to be responding to your lessons, and you can have a little bit more of a flow. This is going to have to be more structured for students. So we've been working on that. We developed a model, a hybrid model. We sent surveys out to parents. We sent surveys out to staff. And we developed a hybrid model for elementary and a hybrid model for the high school. And as we were testing out the model, we recognized all of the challenges that we were going to have with it. For example, Melanie spoke to the distancing that needs to happen. So we actually, our principals and facility director actually went into every single classroom, pulled out all furniture, even the teacher desks, and then put student desks back in and lined them up 6 feet apart from each other to see how many we could get in there. Very few of our classrooms are able to get 100% of their class load, the numbers, into the classroom. Some situations like Barstow, it's pretty significant. It's close to half the kids could fit into an elementary classroom. Other schools might be closer and down by 4 or 5 kids. At the high school, we played with the idea of having 50% of the kids in 2 days a week and 50% the other 2 days. And then it was pointed out that that means that with 50% of the kids and 100, or with all the faculty there, we were going to have over 400 people in the high school still. And that makes us very anxious. So we played around with 25%. So we were going down that path, and we were trying to make that work. Some new data came out as well, Evolve Science, that tells us that the kids under the age of 10 have the lowest transmission risk and are least likely, or have get the virus less often. So it's a safer group, and they're basically saying under 10. You may have read that in the free press yourself. But however, the older students, 10 and older, while the virus in the student may not be as serious as in an adult, it can be, but it's less likely to be. The transmission rate is just the same as adult to adult. So we recognize that there's a difference in those two different groups of students, the under 10 and 10 and above as well. So ultimately, what we decided to do, there are so many logistics that Melanie just spoke of as well. And we're concerned about a staff impact and what staff we're going to be able to bring back, because there still is a list of staff who are vulnerable, who may not be able to return. So ultimately, what our decision was to do a phased approach to returning to school. Also, we wanted to make sure that we get the remote learning down well, because if we end up back in remote learning, say December, November, February, then it shouldn't be as sudden or as unexpected as it was last March. We should be able to carry the remote learning all the way through the school year, even with the kids in school, just by using the computers and using the tools, even when they're in with their teacher. So we decided that that we would bring back the kindergarten first and second graders who are clearly within that lower risk group, and the pre-kindergartners. The pre-kindergartners are going to have their normal pre-kindergarten schedule. Sometimes it's 3 days a week, sometimes it's 2. It depends on the program you're in, which school you're in. That doesn't change. But then kindergarten first and second grade will be in the classroom with their teachers. If there is a family who does not wish to bring in their kindergarten first or second grader, and there are many, our survey indicated 60% of our families were really uncomfortable with returning to school. We'll see what happens when school happens, but so if there are some families, then they will be able to log into that classroom. We will live stream the class. And again, they'll have a schedule. It's not sitting in front of a computer, but they'll have a schedule on when to log in for different parts of the class. So they can be part of the class for morning meeting. They could have their literacy group. They could have their math group. They could see their friends. They could be part of the social skills. We also opted, and then we made 3 to 12 remote at the start of the year. The plan is that as we assess, as it becomes clear that this is successful for the K-1-2, that the health screening logistics are in place, that the students are and staff are tolerating the masks. Don't forget, it's very, very hot as well in early September in the schools. That we can spread out students and take more space than the classroom if need be, if we don't have enough students in that class out. Then we would look at bringing in probably the 3rd and 4th graders, probably up to 5th grade. 6th to 12th will probably be later in the month of September, early October, and will probably land with the hybrid model. I'm sorry, I keep saying probably, but my point is this is all based on data and the science of the moment. So based on the current science, we would bring the middle school and high school back in a hybrid model. Later in the fall, late September, early October, we anticipate. I cannot guarantee a date. Anything can happen. We could start with the K-1-2 students and have an outbreak in a community. We could start school, and because there are a lot of families traveling out of state and tourists traveling in state, we could have an outbreak in the state that shuts down schools. So we have to watch the data as well as our staffing ability and our own data, our own logistics and our data. So the plan is to start with K-1-2 and then slowly build with other groups into the school. We recognize that that's a hardship for families. And unlike other districts, actually, we will be offering an in-person support. I didn't want to call it a childcare, but it's similar to that, where we will have a non-certified person, a paraprofessional or a monitor, in charge of a pod of 10 students and helping them access the remote learning from school. So the parents can go to work, or even if they work from home, but they just simply have to have, it just works better that way. Then we will help with that. And again, I can't give lots of detail on that until I see the numbers, and that's the survey just went out tonight for us to assess how many people want to access that. How many people who want to access that could change other plans as well. Right now, we're talking a lot in theory because we don't have real numbers until we get these survey results back. So this plan will evolve as we have more and more information. So we will be providing that support for parents third grade through 12th grade. And the teacher will be teaching. So for example, a third grade teacher will be teaching from either from home or from school as their choice. And the students will have their device, and in their pod, they can access the online classes with the support of an adult, but they also will have time outside. They will have time for lunch. They will have time to take a break and have a very structured, but still it's not all computerized work. And then again, we'll bring kids in as soon as we can. As you know, the board, because you approved the purchases, we are purchasing Chromebooks. We'll have one available for every student who needs one. And for those who need internet access, we actually can get Chromebooks with hotspot access. We thought we were going to hand that out automatically, but what we're discovering because of the difficulty actually purchasing enough devices, because the whole world is doing this right now, we are assessing internet we are asking parents to notify us if they need that internet access for their students. But this we expect to solve the issue of the students, the 25% of the students who could not access the internet in the spring. Also, we kind of prioritized, we plan to serve any child who needs to come in school to be served, but we're really pushing for the kids who don't have internet access, the kids who have difficulty learning or social emotional difficulties on their own, and the kids who are more vulnerable and need extra support. So we really want to go out and partner with parents and bring those kids in. In the school, with the elementary school, we will have counselors, and actually district-wide, we will have our counselors in school. We'll have our special educators. Some will be in school, some will be remote. Our academic interventionists will be there to give the direct services to our younger students. So we're, like I said, it's a hybrid approach. We will not do field trips for at least the fall of this school year. We don't know about the remainder of the year. We are looking at individual programs and program needs. For example, Moose Lamoo is largely an outdoor program. That might be a program that we're going to be able to do in person. We're trying to figure out how we can do that safely. The state has already told us that driver's ed can have 2 students in a car with the instructor. And we started that July 1st. So we will continue providing driving instruction based upon the state guidance of 2 students in a car into the school year. So that will keep running. We will continue to partner with Rutland Mental Health and Counseling Services of Addison County. They will be available to our students in the schools just as they were before. Let's see. Let me just check and see if there was something else I wanted to cover, and then I can open to board credits, but or questions, but let me just see. Developed a hybrid plan. I think I think I covered all the high points of the plan. The plan will continue to evolve. We do know that we're getting updated state guidance probably early next week. Sports, we're waiting on that guidance. We anticipate that we'll at least be able to have practices. We don't yet know about games. So we're waiting on that guidance. So the plan will evolve as we get more information because that's still coming from the state. And Lori, I think that's it. If you want to see if there's any board questions, and I can look at the chat after if there's time.
Sure. Thank you very much for going through all of that. So I will open it up for board questions at this time. I will ask that you use the little raise your hand icon so that I make sure we do this in order. No one has a question? Really?
They're still looking for their icon.
Maybe that's what the problem is.
All my questions are in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Angela.
Okay, I can turn to the chat then if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you do that? And then if someone else has a question, I will interrupt you. How's that?
Okay, that sounds good. So for kids who are in grades 3 to 12, who might come to school for various reasons, how will they have access to their teacher? Will it only be the parent in charge of the group? Okay, so they'll have access to their teacher just like a child at home would have access to their teacher. They will be accessing the remote learning, but they'll be accessing it at school with the help of an adult who's helping a small group. So it's just like as if they were at home, only they're at school. And if the group size of 10 is too large, we'll adjust to 8. Oh, Angela, thank you for asking this question. Yes, the governor has changed our start date to September 8th today. I do not yet know how that plays out for our teachers. I need to think that through. I had asked the boards and the association to let us postpone our start to August 31st so that teachers could have additional time to learn to plan their units together. Now the governor has declared it is September 8th, so that probably moves our teacher dates back. But for parents to know that the first day of school now is September 8th, which is the day after, sounds really late, but it's the day after Labor Day. That will, I suspect, cause us to stay longer in June as well. In the guidance for reopening the schools issued on 6/17, Governor Scott recommended starting the schools at step 2, correct, and that's what we're designing. Recently, Dr. Fauci has also recognized the importance of schools with low positive rates like Vermont, which is last in the country. Did we consider thinking outside the box and having classes outside or in other areas of the school, or perhaps having only math and science using the hybrid model at the high school level? Great question. So we did think about the outside part, and we also recognize that we live in Vermont, and what happens when we wake up in the morning and it's pouring rain, plus after September, it starts to get cold. So we did not put a lot of effort into outside, except that if there is a teacher, such as Moose Lamu, who does a lot of outside instruction, we'd like that to happen still. We want to get kids outside, mask off, and breathing fresh air as often as we can. We also did look in other areas of the school. Dave, the principal of Barstow, is on the call, and I might quote him wrong, but we were looking at Barstow of actually putting 108 students in the gym in pods. That just did not make sense to me. I mean, you know, if the classrooms are that small that you're putting 108 people into a large space, that just doesn't make sense. We are, for even K-1-2, depending on the numbers that come in, we are prepared to spill out into other areas of the school if need be. And that's one of the things that we're going to be watching as we bring kids back. Part of that is going to depend on how many parents continue to choose remote learning. If everybody came back, we don't have enough space and we would absolutely have to go hybrid. High school, we have been playing with a few different models at high school. We did consider having, for example, just 2 classes on one day and 2 classes on the next day. Currently, our current thinking is that we would have all 4 classes in a much shortened model on one day and students who are at home will stream into the class. And once we bring students in, when students are in, they'll be in class. So the teacher would be in class teaching live and live streaming to the percentage of students who are at home, so we could keep the school year moving forward. So that's what we hope to get to at the high school. Yes, Angela once again reminds us the start is September 8th. If a lot of kids opt for the in-school support, will you consider creating a pod with a licensed teacher? Great question, Phoebe. Yes, we will be considering that. Again, until we have a survey asked in June, when people were just coming off of the year and there was so much in the news and Vermont wasn't doing as well as they are now, is not necessarily how people might answer this next week. And we recognize that. So now we need real numbers. So this is our plan. However, the numbers may adjust our plan accordingly. Does this mean the teachers are only offering instruction for half day, even remotely? I'm not sure which teachers you mean. Our K-1-2, I did forget to mention that. Our K-1-2 is doing morning only to start with. Again, we want to see how long students and staff both can tolerate the masks. We're aware that our schools get very, very hot in the month of September, and it is not recommended that we put fans in the room. We are working on our HVAC systems, but we do not have air conditioning in our schools. So about noon is about all we think that people can tolerate. That also can increase if things go well and it cools down. The other teachers, the high school middle school, high school schedule is probably also going to run about 8 to noon or 8:30 to noon. The 3rd through 6th grade teachers, I don't think that it's limited to half day. We're still working on the details there, but I think it will be limited to the school day. We, if somebody is in the K-1-2 and wishes to join the in-school support for the afternoon, they can do that. That clearly will be more recreational and childcare, but also there will be some lessons that can go with them, follow them to that area. Will the pods be created based on grade level or multi-age? Most likely multi-age, but hopefully close grades. Again, until we see the numbers, I can't answer that absolutely for sure. But I anticipate that we'll have some grades where it can be grade level and some might be 2 grade levels. Will Rutland Mental Health be at the School for Services? Yes, we anticipate bringing them back into the schools. If games are not, oh, that's a really good question. If games are not allowed, why was there a baseball game already at the school? Very good question. So the baseball game that was already at the school was not a school-sponsored game. So the state does already have guidelines for recreation. So Little League, Babe Ruth, other recreational clubs. And our fields are available to those recreation clubs. If they use our fields, we tell them, we remind that we have them sign off that they know what the state guidelines are, but we do not monitor them. We are not responsible for them. We just allow any pickup game as well to use our fields. Our outside, other than playgrounds, is open to the community. However, the school sports program is going to be dictated by statewide guidance. And I know that they're working with the recreational program, so I think there will be a lot of overlap. I just don't know what it is yet. I expect it to be out by the end of this week, early next week at the latest, probably this week. I'd also like to know if teachers are planning for full day learning at the high school level. Teachers would log in for their hour or so long classes. So the way we're envisioning the high school right now is there are 4 blocks at the high school, and normally they're 80-minute blocks. We're envisioning changing that to 35 or 40-minute blocks with maybe a 10-minute break in between blocks. And so a student, but it's a set schedule. So the student knows that I have English first block. So, and they know that it's going to start, I'll just say 8:30. So they will log on to 8:30 with their class, with their English teacher. And depending on what the teacher is doing that day, it might be a lesson, it might be some breakout rooms and small group work. It might be just an overview of what work needs to be done for the next day or some individual conferencing. Student stays in the class as long as they need to stay in that class, leaves the class when it's individual work, and then logs back in for their second block. So they will have 4 blocks and log into each block. Each day is what we plan to get to. And that way the class continues to move forward as well. Will students be allowed to wear the clear plastic face shields instead of masks? Also a good question. The current guidance from CDC and the Vermont Department of Health are that the face shields are not as effective as a mask. So the preference is the cloth facial mask. If that cannot, there might be a reason why that's not appropriate. It might be a developmental reason. It might be a special needs reason, in which case the student or the adult may be able to wear the plastic face shield. So it's an alternative, but it's not an automatic alternative. If you think about it, for example, the shield might protect you from somebody who sneezes on you, but if you sneeze, the droplets can still extend beyond the shield. So it's not the first choice, but it is an alternative for us to consider. He recommended opening in step 2. That's correct. We're opening in step 2, and then we're phasing into step 3. Do we have enough paraeducators to support this plan, or will new paras need to be hired? We anticipate that we will need to hire some new folks, and I anticipate that for 2 reasons. In the virtual learning part of the plan, I would rather make sure that I am well staffed, and so I think we will need some additional paras hired for that. When we bring kids back in, we have to remember that we are in a pandemic, and then there's life, and people get sick. And I am very concerned about not being able to find substitutes when I need substitutes. So I would like to hire some permanent subs for the year who in virtual learning can manage pods. And when teachers need a substitute, as we come back into the schools, they can be a substitute. So I think that for this year, and our plan is to use the federal COVID relief money, we will need some extra adults, both to be with kids and extra adults on the buses, so that to do the health screening, and extra adults to do custodial work. So if there's anybody watching who wants a job, please contact us. The kindergarten teams do amazing work outside already. I know they do. And we have been fortunate to have 4 wins in many of our schools as well, who have already talked to us about how can we help you get kids outside. And we're really going to encourage outside as much as possible. We're also ordering extra picnic tables so that we can get some groups outside. Do we know the number of students who need in-person in-school supports? We do not. That is what the survey went out tonight for. Do we have capacity for that? We'll build capacity. Is there any need to ask parents and families who are able to keep their children home to do so? 2 questions about virtual remote learning. So after the survey results come in, and again, the survey just went out at 4:30 this afternoon. When I logged on, when the meeting started at 5, we already had 122 responses. So we want people to tell us what are you planning on doing, and then we'll have the numbers. And like I said to the person earlier, it might change our plans. But until we have real numbers, we've been working in hypotheses and in response to the numerous emails that have come to me throughout the summer. Lori, how will high school access remote learning? Will they have Google Classroom meetings, classes with teachers? Will that be assignments, or are kids on their own? So I think I answered this one already. I'll move on and we'll make sure we put it in writing. What happens to the kids who really struggle with remote learning, as in not participating, or if a high school student, this then standards in the way of graduation for those students, what is the plan for those kids? So we are also concerned. We had some kids that disappeared in the spring that really did not connect well. We want to reach out to those kids in particular at high school and bring them in, and those families at the younger levels, and prioritize getting those kids in. Some kids thrived on the remote learning. Some kids really need that face-to-face, and we're going to try to meet both needs as we're building this up. What are the virtual remote expectations? How does grading credit work? What are the expectations on the parents? Do we have any privacy concerns around the live stream and filming? Great questions, deeper detail that I'm ready to go into tonight. This is part of the expectations and plan that we're developing for teachers right now. So we will get that information back to you, but it's deeper than I'm able to go tonight. I'm sensing high school is working toward 4-block learning. Is that correct? So they won't start this way. Step 2 is hybrid learning. Step 2, actually, the guidance says anything from remote to hybrid to full in person. So we are starting in step 2, and they will start in the 4-block learning in remote, and we'll move as quickly as we can to hybrid, partial in, partial out. Oh, Brenda, not a question, but I want to say that I appreciate the efforts to meet the wide scope of needs of students and families and keep everyone, including staff, safe. Thank you, Brenda. I really appreciate that. And I do want to point out that schools are staffed. And we want our adults healthy as well, and we want to keep our adults. And there are some employees who may not be able to return to work that we hope will return when we get past this part of our lives, past, if we can ever imagine, a post-pandemic point. So the more we can keep our staff healthy and safe, the better it is for our students. If I lose staff and bring in subs at a very late date like this, I am unlikely to find licensed subs and certified subs. And so I really do need to also prioritize the needs of our staff and our students, as well as the fact that the schools can prevent an outbreak in the community if we can keep ourselves safe. How often will guidance be available for kids? For example, seniors, college deadlines, etc. Seems like last year they only had an hour of availability. They were required to respond. So we're bringing our guidance counselors in, and they plan on doing the college process. It might be remotely, but we will be working on making sure that counselor availability does exist. That's the end of the chat, but I see Debbie Singeiser's hand is up. Debbie?
Just a couple questions, Jean. First of all, have the criteria or the conditions been enumerated that would require a school to close? And what would that look like? And then who ultimately makes that decision? Is that up to you, or is that up to the health department?
So there was guidance that was put out last week around decisions around closure. If it's a decision to close that has to do with lack of staffing capacity, or a potentially very small outbreak and nobody's coming in because there is panic in the community, I can close the school, the superintendent can. But if it's a closure under COVID, if it's an outbreak, or as Melanie said earlier, if a student or a staff is identified as positive, I would be working with the health department, and that decision would be made in concert or totally by the health department, either one.
So as a follow-up question to that, has that been defined at all yet by the department? Like how many cases would be, how many students who positive cases it would entail to close the school, that kind of thing, or is that just impossible?
Yes and no. As they were describing to me today, there's an art and a science to it.
Yeah.
So for example, the contact tracing will tell them whether or not somebody has been minimally exposed or if it is a significant exposure and how far it's going. That really is in their field, and perhaps it might be useful to ask one of the doctors to join us on this call, or a call like this next month, so that people can ask those questions. I do know that there have been some public presentations already from the medical community on how they would make those decisions, but I am going to follow their decisions on that. So I'm not the expert in that. But what I would be bringing to the conversation is my knowledge of our community, the response of, our parents, our community. For example, the Manchester non-outbreak that recently occurred, that was thought to be an outbreak, caused a great deal of panic. And there was a school program happening in Manchester Elementary School, and that superintendent made the decision to call while the Department of Health was doing the work they were doing, and then reopened after consultation with them. So there is a little bit of give and take, but the true medical guidance, that is what they went to school for, and we are going to trust the science. I'm not going to put us in a liable position otherwise.
That makes sense. I did have a separate question related to something totally different. And is that okay to ask, Lori?
How about Debbie, how about if I put you back in the queue? Because I have Alice.
Okay,
Is that all right?
that's fine. I'll raise my hand again.
Okay, thank you. So Alice, you didn't hear my answer to the question about high school. Yes, the high school will start with 4-block remote online learning. If that wasn't the question, then I guess I missed it. Oh, good. Okay, I got the question. Thank you. Then Mike, then Ethan, then Debbie. So Mike?
Yeah, I kind of hate to ask the question, but I guess I'm going to. So if the VPA allows athletics to be played, are we kind of contradicting ourselves based on what we're saying versus what the VPA is allowing?
Can you tell me more about your question?
So we're saying we don't want kids in school. We want to keep remote learning, distance learning, and so forth. But with sports, we're not doing that.
Perhaps we're not doing that. So the difference is, when I talk about kids being in school, I'm talking about 4 to 7 hours of intensive, close together, 400 bodies at the high school or 700 bodies at the high school. That's different than a team who is together for practices, perhaps a game for a couple of hours based upon the guidance of the state. So there is a difference there. Ethan, then Debbie. How are we doing on staff morale? Are we concerned about being below capacity? Are staff feeling prepared and supported by the district's plan to reopen? Staff, just like parents, are very anxious. I have staff who are pregnant. I have staff who have health issues. I have staff who live with somebody or primary caregiver for somebody with health issues. I have staff who work for our school district, but live in another school district, who might be remote or hybrid, and they're wondering how they're going to come to work to teach our kids when their kids are home. Our staff are dealing with the same work issues that our parents are dealing with. If there are staff who live in our communities, they can access our program, but if they live outside our communities, they cannot. And in particular, I think that the health concerns, there are a number of vulnerable conditions that staff are being told that it's their responsibility to talk to their doctor to find out whether or not they should return to work. I think that starting with the remote option, the impression I got from staff who responded to that, and we had staff help develop that, was that it seemed, this soft start seemed respectful of students who need to learn something new, as well as the staff who need to adjust to this. But am I concerned about being below capacity? Yes, I am concerned. Alice, I'm jumping back to you, even though Debbie's waiting. When will you evaluate the hybrid edition? I think we're going to get school started for a couple weeks, about 2 weeks, and then we're going to evaluate everything. My hope, if all went well, is by the end of September, early October, we might start bringing high school in, but it depends on staffing, data on the cases, data on the transmission in the community, and space. That's really what it depends on, is primarily those two things, those two primary metrics. Debbie?
So I'm curious, Jean, if you could describe how are the logistics and technology going to work in a class where a teacher is teaching to some live students and some remotely?
Yeah, So apparently Rutland City Schools did this a bit in the spring, which I didn't know. And they said it worked pretty well. But we are purchasing cameras for the classroom. The cameras would focus on the teacher, not the students. And students at home can log in to the classroom, similar to this meeting right now. And the teacher will teach from the classroom. So at high school, that's pretty much live streaming. At elementary, you don't want kids necessarily in that format all day long. So they would come and go, but they would know the schedule to come and go. That's what we would be doing. A side comment, when I was young, I read a book about polio and how this school tried to include a child into class who had to be homeschooled for polio. And so they bought this magic box so that the student could follow along in this magic box. Barbara, you get to look up the book and tell us the title. I don't know what it is. But I was fascinated by that as a child. So here I am now, many, many years later, developing basically the same type of system for somebody who needs to be home. So Lisa came in late, wants to know if we're going to go into detail to parents what the school day looks like. Yes. This is our first high level approach to what in general it looks like. But yes, after the survey results come in, then we can dive in deeper to the individual details, and there will be a lot of detail of what the school day looks like. But maybe small steps, I don't know, I'll look it up. Thanks, Barbara. But generally, Lisa, I'm not sure if you heard, but at high school in particular, middle school, high school, we're looking at taking the regular school day just as if they were going in, and setting a schedule where like high school block 1 might be at 8:30, block 2 might be at 9:15, whatever those times are. And the student would, if their block 1 is English, they're going to sign into block 1 English at 8:30 and have the teacher and the class there, get their lesson, get their assignment, whatever is happening for that day. It might be collaboration, it might be a teacher conference, it might be just understanding the assignment, it might be an actual lesson. And then they might have some independent time and then log on to block 2, etc. So that's pretty much what high school and middle school will be similar. And then elementary will be Google Classroom will identify throughout the day, this is when you sign on for morning meeting, this is when your literacy group is, this is when your math group is, etc. Yeah, it's not supposed to be like last year. That's something else that we'll be assessing though, to get kids in as soon as we possibly can. But we've been doing a lot of work to actually learn online learning, which we did not have the pleasure of doing when we suddenly closed in March. Any other questions?
Derek, did I see you wave your hand?
Yes,
Go for it.
I have a question. 2 questions. One, what arrangements or guidance is there if a student's family dynamic is affected by the COVID? Not necessarily the student directly or immediately, but is a student in an environment where COVID has arisen?
Then the student, if again, we'll follow the Department of Health guidance, but most likely that student would be isolated or in voluntary quarantine with the family, and they would learn from home. Is that what you mean?
Yes. I'm just wondering about the communication piece of how that might happen. I mean, I don't know how that would happen.
You mean, how would we know if a family member is affected?
How would the school know that there was a situation out?
So I see 3 options. The Vermont Department of Health chooses to tell us, the child or family chooses to tell us, or we don't know.
Right. Number 2, could you speak to arrangements around Stafford or Hannaford or other community-based programs?
We do not plan to start jobs, community-based jobs right off. Stafford has developed their own plan. We will still get our students to Stafford, and I was going to say Stafford was going to start on August 26th, but with the governor's order today, I don't know if that changes. So, but Stafford has their own system that's set up. So our responsibility is to still connect the student with Stafford. We'll have our, so that's also on the bus survey that went out today, transportation survey. One change in the transportation as well, because we need to do health screenings at first point of contact, we will need to, where we used to stop on Route 30 or 7 or 4, that's no longer safe because we'll have to take temperatures, et cetera. So we're gonna need to set up some, we're calling them cluster bus stops, but some bus stops where we can take the temperature off-road and keep students safe. Good question. How will I handle students who do not wear their masks? If it's a philosophical issue with wearing the mask, then they will have remote learning. If it's a student with special needs, identified or not, if a student with special needs, then we will, that's a team will wrap around that student. That includes the health professional, a special educator, or behavior specialist if needed, the building principal, and we will try to determine if there is a way to help, whether it is the shield, whether it's a teaching of the use of the mask, but there's so many different types of masks as well. And so we will try to work with the student, but ultimately everybody who is in school per governor's order must wear the mask, a facial covering. Yes, Lisa, you had missed that. The governor announced today that all schools will start on September 8th. Derek, did you have a second question?
Nope, looks like he's fine. I have a question though. Surrounding some of the Let's Talks that we had, can you speak to the fact that as far as talking to other surrounding districts, because of course Rutland City is going full in person and Orwell or Slate Valley is going hybrid.
And even the Rutland City, I believe, has a remote option.
Okay, so could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, the regional superintendents actually talk twice a week, and we've been sharing plans and sharing obstacles and grappling with this together. But ultimately, each district, the state left it to each district to determine what they felt was the safest way to begin on the continuum from full remote to full in person, with the prioritization of the younger students, which we are doing. So the way we developed ours, unfortunately, now it's in Chittenden County, that regional superintendent's group did agree on a single model. Unfortunately, our regional group did not. So each of us have had a task force working. We briefly discussed, can we try to get this as alike as possible? And it wasn't possible. Different communities have different expectations. Different schools, depending on the size of the school, the space of their classroom, their staffing needs, it was not possible for us to do that. So this is our plan. And it is similar to one or two of the other surrounding districts and is building to be similar to a different couple of other school districts. But this is our phase-in plan. Jacob, in evaluating the process, what does that look like? Are you planning on working with the same task forces or bringing different voices into the process? I think right now we have the plan, and what it looks like, as I said earlier, is primarily the metrics of, are we keeping kids safe? Are we able to, you can't ever ensure safety, but are we able to ensure reliable, safe measures and procedures? Do we have the adequate staffing? What are the numbers of in-school pods versus remote learning? You know, are people voting with their feet? All of those things have to come into play. So the plan is already set. It's not a case of different voices to change the plan, because it's not a case of what do people want at this point. It's how is it working? Is it working? Are our kids, is it working for our 3rd and 4th graders to be learning remotely? That would be the next group I would focus on, because they still are in the low risk group, lower risk group. So we have a phased in plan that way. I am receiving a lot of emails. It got overwhelming on Friday after the plan went out Thursday, and I had to kind of put a pause and say, please give me a couple days to catch up, but I'm caught up now. And I really appreciate the emails that come in, even the ones that disagree with the plan. I appreciate the opportunity to connect directly with people, and some great questions are coming in. Even the FAQ that was in the FAQ document that I put in yesterday's parent email has already been added to, and tonight we'll add to quite a bit of it. So it's very helpful. Also, the questions that come in, actually kind of back to Jacob's point, the questions that come in will kind of guide some of those decisions as well, because there are things that people think of that maybe we didn't. So it's like, oh, very good question. How we need to incorporate this. Lisa, the hotspots on the survey tonight, you were asking people to identify if they need hotspots. We are buying Chromebooks with hotspots for the older kids. Originally it was 5th to 12th. We're also finding a lack of supply for them because most of the country or the world is buying Chromebooks and Chromebooks with hotspots. So we will prioritize we believe that we'll have a Chromebook for every student, and we'll prioritize the hotspots to the neediest of families first. So fill in the survey. It's not a first come, first serve survey, but fill in the survey so that we know what your needs are.
Are there any other questions for Jean at this time? If you have a question, please use the little raise your hand so that because I can't see everybody all at once.
So there's one from Becky and then one from Kevin.
Yep. So who was first?
I'll do Becky because I'm reading
Okay.
it. Currently, what grade do we start allowing students to get off the bus without an adult there to wave? I believe it's 3rd. I'll double check that. Does this match with the student grades for the reopening plan? I'll double check that, Becky. Kevin. Okay, thanks, Angela. Kevin.
His question is in the chat. It was actually above Becky's.
Oh, I see. I had someone question whether paras will be working harder, more directly with kids and taking more risks than faculty. So all of our staff, I've had the same type of question, Kevin, about from teachers who are saying, well, K-2 teachers, special educators, counselors, interventionists are going to be in the school and other teachers can teach from home. Is that more of a risk? Ultimately, we all need to do what we need to do for kids, and it's incumbent upon us to follow the guidance that says we will do health screenings, we will wear masks, and so we will stick to that strongly. We will ensure the hand washing habits, and we will do the physical distancing. So if somebody is following all of that, they really are not at that much more risk than, and maybe less so than the person going to the grocery store, is what the medical guidance says. No, Lisa, we're going to spend it all. We just might have to wait for it to come in. I'm sorry, the question is, so there is money that you aren't going to spend for hotspots. Where is that money going? So we have the money set aside to buy the computers with the hotspots. We are buying more computers than we originally asked the board for, more Chromebooks to make sure that we have plenty. And then we're also buying additional staffing. Becky asks, with a concern about the 3rd graders, are we putting them at risk of being home alone too young? Again, this is not an ideal situation. We are in a pandemic and we're trying to do a safe start to the school year. And parents do have an option in our district, whereas they don't in other districts. So I'm hopeful that we were working hard to meet as many needs as we could. Thank you, Jean, for all of your hard work and your teams. Thank you. Bye, Debbie. She signed off.
Can we go back to Becky's? I just want to clarify something as far as the third graders. As far as being home alone, they do have the option of coming in and being in a classroom setting with a para or another educator of some sort in
Correct.
school, correct? So I would hope that no one would allow their child at third grade to stay home alone unless they're well vetted to do so. I would hope that the parent would let us know and so that we can bring them in. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Nikki, you have a question.
Yeah, just thinking about Jean, you had stated that some of the teachers might be choosing to teach from their classrooms at school. So
Right.
if that happens and some of their students have signed up for the pods that you're going to be having in the school, will those children just be with their teachers in that case, or?
It's a possibility. I don't want to say yes or no for sure, but we have thought about that as a possibility. Lisa, I am doing a Q&A online live. I have thought about doing that. I've also thought about doing one with teachers. We'll see how it develops. This was a nice test run.
Are there other questions for Jean at this time? I'm not seeing any hands raised. I want to thank Jean very much and her group of people that helped put this plan together. I know it's not what everybody likes. We're bound to tick off some people and make other people happy, and other people, you know, well, whatever, we'll get through it. But I know that you're keeping our students and our staff and our faculty in the forefront of your mind, and that's what we need to be doing at this time. So.
Thank you everyone for logging on, because as soon as I put that plan out, I knew it was really important, in particular that the board had an idea of the specifics so that you could help in the community. And I'm glad that some people did, some guests did log on, and you know, I think we can consider a live Q&A. Lisa, you can tell me what you think of it and if you think it's a good idea.
Cool. All right. Well, not hearing any other questions, unless someone turns their mic on and says, "No, I have a question." I'm going to say that unless someone disagrees, that we are going to call this meeting to an end at 7:14.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Jean. Really do appreciate it.
Hey, Jean and Lori, can you stay on for 30 seconds?
Yes, let me stop the recording.